Sorry, Olivia. Strict capacity limit. We didn't get your RSVP in time. My mother's voice was a whisper, but it cut through the freezing Colorado air like a blade. I stood on the porch of the massive Peaks estate, holding my 7-year-old son, Liam's hand. His little grip tightened in mine. Inside, I could hear laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the roar of a warm fire. But here, outside the heavy timber door, the wind off the aspen peaks bit into our faces. My mother did not even look at me. She looked past me, as if I were a delivery person who had arrived at the wrong address. Sitting here with my coffee, watching the world drift by, I can't help but reflect on how cold life can feel when family turns away. Where are you watching from today? And what's your favorite drink right now? I always look forward to your comments. But back on that porch, a quiet decision was already forming. I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not even knock again. I simply looked at my mother's perfectly manicured hand as she began to pull the door shut. Through the narrowing gap, I saw my brother, Luke, sitting by the hearth. He was swirling a glass of expensive red wine, laughing at something my father said. He did not look my way. He did not have to. He was the golden child, and I was just the background noise of their perfect life. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed in the sudden silence of the mountain night. I stood there for a heartbeat, watching my breath hitch in the air. Then I turned around. I picked Liam up. He was shivering so hard, his teeth were chattering, and walked back to the car. My husband, Jonathan, was already opening the passenger door. He did not say a word. He just took Liam from my arms, buckled him into the back seat, and wrapped him in a heavy wool blanket. As I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the snow piling up on the windshield, I did not feel the heat from the vents. I felt a strange, clinical clarity. For 32 years, I had been dragging around an invisible chain. It was a heavy, rusted thing, made of hope and a desperate need for validation. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy my way back into their hearts. I was the one who worked 80-hour weeks as an interior designer, just so I could afford the gifts that made them smile for 5 seconds. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, always footing the bill but never getting a seat at the table. Every expensive holiday, every loan to my parents that never got repaid, every time I covered for Luke's mistakes, I thought I was earning a place. But as I watched the lights of the Peaks estate fade in my rearview mirror, I realized that my compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. The chain did not just break tonight, it shattered. I realized that their rejection was not a tragedy. It was the final receipt in a business transaction that had gone bankrupt a long time ago. I was not losing a family, I was losing a debt. This was not a breakdown, it was accounting. I looked at Jonathan, my hands steady on the steering wheel, and for the first time in my life, I felt light. I told myself right then, do not ever waste your energy trying to display yourself out as a bridge for people who are perfectly happy watching you drown. Sometimes, being cast out is the greatest gift of freedom you will ever receive. I kept driving down the winding mountain road, but my mind was already auditing the last decade of my life. I was 32 years old, a principal interior designer with a portfolio that most people in my industry would kill for. I had built my firm from the ground up, using late nights and grit to construct a life that was entirely my own. My brother, Luke, was 29, and his most notable achievement was convincing our father that his third failed cryptocurrency startup was a visionary move. My parents, Melissa and Gregory, looked at us through a fractured lens. To them, Luke was the future, a brilliant man who was just one lucky break away from greatness. I was merely the spare part, the reliable machine they kept in the garage until something broke down. They had normalized the idea that my only function was to be the family's shock absorber. I remembered when Luke totaled his luxury SUV last year. He had been reckless, but instead of letting him face the consequences, Gregory had called me, not to ask how I was, but to tell me that it would be best for the family image if I secretly covered the $15,000 collateral debt. to prevent a public repossession that would have humiliated the family in front of the entire neighborhood. I paid it. I paid for his mistakes, his vanity, and his laziness, all while they leased him a replacement vehicle that cost more than my first 2 years of salary. This is the trap of normalizing cruelty in a family dynamic. Melissa and Gregory did not think they were being monsters. They had simply agreed upon a silent contract where my worth was purely transactional. In their eyes, my success was not a reason for pride, it was a resource to be harvested. This is how narcissistic parenting works. The golden child, like Luke, becomes an extension of their ego, while the scapegoat, like me, becomes their utility. They needed me to be successful enough to fund their lifestyle, but invisible enough to never remind them of their own failures as parents. Every Christmas, I would arrive at the Peaks estate with gifts that cost me thousands of dollars, hoping that this would be the year they finally saw Olivia, the daughter, instead of Olivia, the bank. But the more I gave, the more they expected, and the less they respected me. Standing on that porch tonight, watching them sip wine that I had likely paid for through some loan to Gregory, I realized they had not just forgotten my RSVP. They had deliberately erased me to protect the lie they were living. I had been the silent investor in their version of a happy family, but tonight, the market had crashed, and I was finally pulling my capital out. We were about 10 minutes down the winding mountain road when the phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet car, startling me so much I almost swerved into a snowbank. I glanced at the display, Grandma Patricia. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to let the Aspen Peaks swallow our taillights and never look back, but I could not do that to her. She was the one person who had ever seen me as more than a financial safety net. I pulled over to the side of the road, the gravel crunching under the tires. I answered with a shaky breath, "Hello, Grandma." Olivia, her voice was sharp, a tone I had never heard her use with me before. It was not angry at me, but it was dangerously cold. "Turn that car around, right now." "Grandma, I cannot," I said, my voice tight. "Mom told us. She said there was a strict capacity limit. She said we were not on the list and we had to go home." There was a silence on the other end, so profound I thought the call had dropped. Then Grandma Patricia spoke again, and her words were like steel. I know exactly what Melissa said. I was in the library, and I just checked the front porch security feed. I watched my daughter close the door on my grandson in a blizzard. That stops tonight. Jonathan was sitting next to me, his hand finding mine on the center console. "Do it, Liv. Turn around." I looked at him, then at Liam in the rearview mirror. He was watching me with wide, hopeful eyes, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. I felt the phantom cold of that porch again, the sting of being erased by my own mother. But Grandma Patricia was not like them. She had built the Peaks estate with her own grit and her own money. If she was issuing a command, it meant the rules of the house were about to change. "I am coming back, Grandma," I said. "Good," she replied. "And Olivia, I want you to bring that digital folder you carry for work, the one with your business records, and those personal bank statements you have mentioned before. I think it is time we have an audit before we serve the turkey." I hung up and felt a surge of adrenaline. This was not a return to a party I was not wanted at. This was a summons to a reckoning. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my laptop bag. Inside were the records I had kept for years. I had the bank statements showing every dollar I had funneled into my parents' accounts to tide them over. I had the proof of the $15,000 I had paid to save Luke from his own failed cryptocurrency debt. I was not going back as the overlooked daughter. I was going back as the only person in that room who actually owned their integrity. The invisible chains were not just broken anymore. They were being forged into a weapon. This was not revenge. It was a hostile takeover of my own life. We stepped back into the lodge, but the atmosphere had shifted. The festive music had been cut short, and the wealthy guests were standing in small, whispering clusters. My mother, Melissa, and my father, Gregory, were standing by the fire, their faces tight with a performance of concerned parents that I had seen 1,000 times. Luke was there too, leaning against the mahogany bar, trying to look bored, but the way he was gripping his glass told a different story. Grandma Patricia did not wait for them to start their act. She walked straight to the head of the long dining table and remained standing, her hands resting on the polished wood. "We are not eating yet," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room with a weight that made the air feel heavy. "Because we are not done with the truth." She turned her sharp gaze toward Luke. "Luke, would you be a dear and fetch your grandfather's antique watch collection from the library safe, the one valued at $120,000? I think it is only right we display the best of our family history tonight." The room went absolutely silent. I watched Luke freeze. He blinked rapidly, a bead of sweat appearing on his temple despite the chill in the lodge. "The watches?" he stammered. I do not think we need them, Grandma. It is a hassle to get them out." "I want them," Grandma Patricia said, her voice like a closing trap. "Go get them." Luke did not move. He mumbled something about the safe code being finicky, his eyes darting toward my parents for help. My father stiffened, and my mother stopped her fake sobbing instantly, her face turning from flushed to a sickly gray. "They are not there, are they?" Grandma Patricia asked. "I will tell you where they are." She reached into the pocket of her wool coat and pulled out a small slip of pink paper. She did not throw it. She slid it across the table toward my father with clinical precision. "Is Fast Cash Pawn and Loan a professional vault, Gregory?" she asked. My father looked like he had been punched in the gut. Behind him, Luke's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the hearth, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I found this pawn receipt in Luke's room this morning," Grandma Patricia continued, her voice turning into steel. "He was so desperate for quick cash that he let a shady pawn shop fleece him, taking a $120,000 legacy for a mere $15,000. He didn't just steal my husband's memory, he threw it away for pennies. And for what? To cover another failed cryptocurrency investment?" She turned her gaze toward Melissa. "And you knew. That is why you did not want Olivia here tonight." The realization hit me harder than the cold on the porch. I looked at the empty display cabinet in my mind. "I would have noticed," I whispered. "I am the only one who cleans those cases every Christmas Eve." "Exactly," Grandma Patricia said. "You needed Olivia gone, not because she was difficult, but because she is the only person in this family with enough integrity to notice a crime. You turned away your own daughter to protect a thief." The silence in the room was no longer just awkward. It was disgusted. But the final blow was yet to come. Grandma Patricia looked at Liam, who was still clutching his blanket, then back at Luke. That collection was not just metal and gears. I had already updated my will to leave those watches to Liam as his future college fund. "You did not just steal from me, Luke. You stole the future from a 7-year-old child." Melissa sat down, weeping into an expensive linen napkin, but it was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. The martyr, the saint, who only wanted Christmas to be perfect for everyone else. Then she turned on me, her eyes flashing with a desperate kind of malice. "This is your fault, Olivia. If you had not been so selfish with your business, if you had just helped your brother when he was struggling with his investments, he would not have had to do this." The audacity was breathtaking. My mother was trying to frame my brother's felony as a failure of my charity. She was attempting to balance his theft against my lack of support. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for decades, and now they were trying to blame me for the bank closure. But the ledger was closed. This was not a family dispute anymore. It was an audit of their souls. Grandma Patricia did not even look at her. She simply turned to the house staff. "Charles, play the porch footage on the main display. I want our guests to understand what capacity limit really means in this house." The massive screen above the fireplace flickered to life. The sound filled the room, Melissa's voice, clear and cruel, cutting through the silence of the lodge. "Strict capacity limit. We did not get your RSVP. Go home, Olivia. There is no room for you here." The collective gasp from the room was audible. The Aspen elite, The neighbors, the business partners, they were not looking at my parents as peers anymore. They were looking at them as pariahs. The social veneer Melissa had spent her life polishing was shattered in seconds. They were not just mean. They were criminals who had turned away their own blood to protect a thief. You turned away your own daughter to protect a thief, Grandma Patricia said, her voice shaking with a suppressed, lethal rage. She looked at my father, Gregory, then back at Melissa, the guest cottage. You have lived there rent-free for 10 years. You have treated it as your birthright while you conspired to pawn my legacy. Mom, please, my father cried, his voice cracking. It is Christmas Eve. Where will we go? There is a car waiting at the gate to take you to a motel I've prepaid for in the valley. It's not the Hilton, but it's a roof over your heads. You have 10 minutes to pack your pride and leave. After tonight, you are on your own. Then she turned to Luke, who was slumped in a chair, his face a mask of ruined arrogance. I am removing you from my will first thing tomorrow morning. The entire estate, the investments, the land, everything goes to Olivia. You cannot do that, my mother shrieked. She is just Olivia. She does not know how to manage a family legacy. I looked at them then, and for the first time in 32 years, I did not see the giants who controlled my happiness. I saw 3 small, desperate people shivering in the warmth of a house they had never deserved. The invisible chain that had bound me to them, the need for their approval, the fear of their rejection, was gone. It lay in pieces on the floor, shattered by the weight of their own greed. I am family, I said, my voice steady and clinical, and you told me to go home, so I am. I gestured toward the door, where the mountain wind was still howling. Grandma has spoken, and I am the one carrying out her wishes. You have no right to be here anymore. Please leave. 1 year later, the fire in the great hall of the Peaks estate crackled with a warmth that felt honest. The smell of cinnamon and roasting turkey filled the air, replacing the cold tension that had haunted these walls for decades. The lodge looked different now. Jonathan and I had spent the last 12 months renovating, stripping away the heavy, dark drapes my mother had loved, and letting in the crisp, clean light of the aspen sun. We had turned the guest cottage, the place where my parents had lived, rent-free for 10 years, into a vibrant art studio for local children and a professional workshop for Jonathan. Liam was sitting on the thick rug near the hearth, his laughter ringing out clear and happy as he tore open a present. He was no longer the shivering boy on the porch. He was a thriving child attending a prestigious school, his future secured by the very legacy that had almost been pawned away. Grandma Patricia sat in the armchair opposite me, watching him with a contented smile on her face. She had lived to see justice take its natural course, and to know her fortune would finally be used for good. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Melissa and Gregory were living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee. They were reportedly bitter and isolated, spending their days complaining to anyone who would listen about how I had stolen their birthright. But the Aspen elite had a long memory for cruelty, and they remained shunned by the circles they had once tried so hard to impress. Luke's fate was perhaps the most fitting. He was currently facing multiple charges for fraud related to yet another failed investment scheme. Without my parents to bankroll his mistakes or me to cover his debts, he was finally learning the value of $1 through manual labor. I had not spoken to any of them since that night, not once. I did not need an apology to find my closure. I had found it in the quiet mornings, the sound of Liam's laughter, and the peace of a home where no one had to audition for love. I sat in the armchair by the fire, holding a mug of hot cocoa and looking at the stockings hanging on the mantel. Olivia, Jonathan, Liam, and Patricia. For the first time in my 32 years, I did not feel the cold draft of impending rejection. I realized that the best revenge was not destruction. It was becoming everything they said I could not be, while watching them crumble under the weight of their own greed. I have come to realize that if you are sitting there right now, feeling the ache of a family that does not see you, or the sting of a door shut in your face, I need you to listen closely. You are not the problem. You are not difficult, or too much, or not enough. You are simply in the wrong house. Do not waste your life standing on the porch, begging for people to let you in when they are the ones who locked the latch. Do not freeze yourself, trying to be warm enough for people who are committed to being cold. Turn around and walk away. Build your own fire. The only thing you truly lose when you cut ties with toxic people is the agonizing pain of trying to please them. And what you gain? I looked around the room at my son, my husband, and my grandmother. You gain everything. You gain your peace, your dignity, and the freedom to be exactly who you were meant to be. If you have found the courage to start your own revolution and build your own fire, I would love to hear your story in the comments. Your journey might be the light someone else needs to find their way out of the cold. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to know they are enough. Do not forget to subscribe for more truths about justice, healing, and the power of self-respect.